I used to think peace had a sound. The slow creak of my wooden bridge, the soft splash of trout below, the wind brushing through the pines. For 15 years, that sound meant home. My little bridge carried nothing heavier than my pickup and a few neighborhood kids on bicycles. It was mine, built with my own hands, the smell of sawdust in the air, a golden retriever named Scout watching from the bank. A bridge between quiet and peace. Until one morning it carried something else, the deep, grinding roar of a cement truck. I still remember how the sound cut through the morning fog like a growl. When I stepped outside, coffee still in my hand, the bridge was trembling. Mud swirled under the planks, and behind the wheel sat Karen, HOA president, sunglasses flashing, hand waving like she owned the place. The truck's tires hissed as it crept across the boards. The air smelled of diesel and arrogance. I shouted, "You're trespassing." She smiled, the kind of smile that's all teeth and no warmth. "Then maybe you should build a stronger bridge, Mike." That one sentence cracked something in me that no truck ever could. She wasn't talking about concrete. She was talking about control. The kind that people like her live for, where rules become weapons and neighbors become subjects. She thought she could drive over me the same way she drove over my bridge. She had no idea who she was dealing with. That afternoon, I stood by the creek and stared at what used to be peace. The boards still looked strong, but they felt different, like they'd been violated. I ran my hand over the rail, rough from years of sun, and thought about the day Miguel and I built it. We measured the span between the rocks, sunk the pilings, sealed the beams with oil and sweat. It wasn't a trophy. It was a promise that I could come home without asking anyone's permission. A promise in wood form. When the HOA formed 2 years ago, I didn't fight it. I even paid the first fee, $50 for beautification. Fine, I like a good streetlight as much as anyone, but boards like that grow like ivy, polite at first, then choking if you let them. Karen got herself elected president the way a thunderstorm elects itself a problem, suddenly and everywhere. Clipboards, urgent emails, and that favorite phrase, "for the community." The first letter I got from her said my canoe rack was non-compliant. The second said my front setback was unclear. The third had a smiley face next to the word meeting. At that meeting, she brought a laminated map printed from who knows where, no topography, wrong scale, and a creek that looked like it was drawn by a child. She tapped it with her pen and said, "As you can see, both approaches to your bridge provide ingress to community amenities." I held up my survey, the one stamped by the county, the one that actually meant something. "As you can see, Karen, this is my property. The easement ends 50 feet before the creek. The bridge is not a community amenity. It's my driveway." She smiled again, that same empty smile. "We'll take this under advisement," which in HOA language means, "we'll do what we want." 2 weeks later, the first cement truck arrived. It roared across the boards like a beast that didn't belong here. Men in neon vests hung from the sides, shouting over the noise. They were headed to Phase 1, a tennis complex with more ambition than sense. The bridge groaned but held. I felt it in my ribs. I felt my patience start to crack. That night I drove to the hardware store, bought 2 cedar posts, a chain, and a sign that read, "Private bridge, 5-ton limit. Trespassers will be prosecuted." I installed it myself by flashlight, the chain clinking in the dark. It wasn't about warning them. It was about reclaiming something that used to be mine, the sound of quiet. By morning, the sign was gone. The chain was cut clean through. In its place hung a pastel notice with cheerful fonts. "Non-compliance, unauthorized restrictive device. Remove within 24 hours or be fined." It fluttered in the breeze like a mockery. I took a picture of it, then another of the boot prints near the creek and the padlock lying in the dirt. Paper can lie, pictures don't. That evening, the neighborhood split like dry wood. Some sent messages of support. Others posted comments online about bridges being meant to be crossed. Miguel stopped by with a cup of coffee, and that look only old friends give when they know you're close to doing something rash. "They're bold," he said. "They're bored," I replied, "and boredom makes people stupid." When the sun went down, I stood on the bridge again. The water moved slow beneath me, whispering the same old song. But that night it didn't sound like peace. It sounded like warning. The next morning started like any other: coffee, silence, a thin mist hovering over the creek. Then came that familiar rumble again. I heard it before I saw it, the low growl of a diesel engine dragging through gravel. The sound crawled under my skin. I stepped onto the porch and there it was, another cement truck, even bigger than the first. Karen sat in the passenger seat, sunglasses on, clipboard in hand, like some kind of construction queen. I walked down the lane slowly, dust crunching under my boots. The bridge was trembling before the truck even reached it. I raised my hand and motioned for the driver to stop. "You're over the limit," I said. Karen leaned out of the window. "Morning, Mike," she said, voice sugary enough to rot your teeth. "We're making progress on the tennis courts. You're obstructing community development." I pointed at the sign. 5 tons, your truck weighs at least 15. She smiled. That sign wasn't approved by the board. "And this bridge wasn't built by it," I said. For a second, our eyes locked, her confidence against my patience. The driver looked between us, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. She gave him a little wave. "Go ahead." The truck rolled forward, the wood moaned, the guardrails quivered. I stepped aside and let the creak record the moment. The bridge held barely. But when the truck reached the other side, I noticed a hairline crack glinting in the sunlight. It wasn't failure, it was warning. That's when I put up the second sign, the ugly one. TRESPSSERS will be PROSSUTD. I didn't like the tone of it, but I'd learned that polite words don't stop heavy wheels. I installed trail cameras high in the alders on both sides of the creek, one facing the bridge, one facing the road. I logged the dates, times, and truck numbers in a spiral notebook. Data is just a story with receipts, and I was building mine line by line. 2 days later, the third truck came. They always come in threes, storms, bad ideas, and cement trucks driven by arrogance. I didn't wave. I didn't argue. I just stood on the bank and watched physics write its own complaint letter. The decking bowed. The bolts groaned. The midspan whispered, "I can carry this once, maybe twice, but I won't forgive." That night, a new notice appeared on my post, bright pink this time, like a valentine from the devil. "Final warning, failure to comply will result in escalating fines." I laughed quietly. Fines for what? For defending the land I'd built with my hands. Around sunset, Hannah from down the road showed up with a dish of peach cobbler and gossip. "They told people you refused to let an ambulance cross last year," she said. I blinked. Funny, I built the bridge wide enough for one. She sighed. "People are scared to speak up. Karen's got them thinking she runs the county." "Then people should try measuring instead of believing," I said. She looked at the cracked plank like it was a bruise on skin. "You going to do something about this?" "Oh, I am," I said quietly. "But I'm not going to shout, I'm going to document." Some fights are won with noise. Others with ounces, the weight of paper, the click of a camera, the slow turn of a wrench. They had a committee. I had gravity, and gravity doesn't need a vote. By midnight, I'd made up my mind. I stopped trying to convince people who'd already chosen not to understand. If they wanted to keep crossing that line, I'd show them exactly where it was in a language they couldn't ignore. The next morning, Miguel showed up in his old blue pickup, toolbox rattling in the back. He stepped out, thermos in hand, and grinned like he already knew why he was there. "Heard you got a traffic problem," he said. "More like a weight problem," I replied. We walked to the bridge, stood there for a long moment, listening to the water curl around the pilings. Miguel crouched, tapped one of the stringers with a wrench, and nodded. "Still solid," he said. "You built it right." "Yeah," I said. "I built it for life, not for HOA egos." He chuckled, a dry sound like gravel. "So what's the plan, amigo? You want me to fix it or teach a lesson?" "Both," I said. He raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. That's the thing about old friends, they don't need details. They just bring tools. Back in my garage, the air smelled of oil, cedar, and coffee. I unrolled the original blueprints of the bridge on the workbench. The paper was faded, the corners curled like old leaves. "You remember the midspan reinforcement?" I asked. Miguel traced it with his finger. "Dual plate girders, 15-ton rating, distributed load." "Exactly, but see here." I pointed at a line of bolts. "If I remove these 4 and replace them with shear pins." Miguel finished my sentence. Still safe for light traffic, but anything over 10 tons, the center flexes just enough to make a point. I nodded, a lesson in engineering. He gave me that look, half admiration, half concern. You're not planning to kill anyone, right? I'm planning to let physics do what HOA meetings never could, set boundaries. Miguel poured us both coffee. You'll need proof, they'll call it sabotage. I already have proof, I said, tapping my laptop. Trail cams, time stamps, weights, every crossing logged. He grinned, then let's make it clean. That afternoon, we got to work. I unbolted a few decking boards near the midspan while Miguel measured with a laser level. We replaced the reinforcement plates with lookalikes, except these were held together by shear pins designed to bend under excessive load. Nothing dangerous, nothing illegal, but heavy enough to teach a lesson. We tested it with my pickup. The bridge creaked, held, and settled back into silence. Perfect. Before sunset, I swept the sawdust into the creek, washed the mud off my hands, and watched the light fade behind the pines. The bridge looked the same, still, quiet, innocent, but it wasn't the same anymore. It was waiting. Miguel leaned against the rail. You ever think about retirement? I smirked. I did, but apparently I'm the entertainment committee now. He laughed. You're crazy, Mike, but I like it. He clapped me on the shoulder before leaving. Remember, don't rush it. Let them walk into their own mistake. I won't, I said. Karen's too proud to slow down. That night I sat on the porch, bourbon in hand, trail cam feeds glowing on my tablet. The creek whispered below, steady as breath. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the low drumbeat of a diesel engine on the county road. They'd come again, they always do. And this time the bridge and gravity would be ready. The morning came slow and quiet, like the world was pretending nothing was about to happen. I woke before sunrise, the air still heavy with fog, coffee steaming against the cold. The creek murmured below the deck, calm as ever, that steady rhythm that had once meant peace. Now it just sounded like patience. I sat on the porch with my tablet open to the trail cam feed. Every few minutes a bird or squirrel triggered the motion sensor, the quiet false alarms before the real show. The bridge sat empty, innocent, a line of wood and bolts over the sleepy creek. Then around 9 I heard it, that deep growl again, the kind of sound you don't just hear but feel in your ribs. A diesel engine winding down the hill. Miguel's words echoed in my head, don't rush it. Let them walk into their own mistake. I leaned forward, eyes narrowing at the live feed. A cement truck crawled into view, followed by the unmistakable red windbreaker of Karen, clipboard in hand. She was talking to the driver, animated, waving toward my bridge like she was directing traffic at a parade. I whispered to myself, here we go. The truck inched down the slope, each rotation of its tires pressing deeper into the gravel. The bridge waited. I waited. When the first tire touched the plank, the wood flexed, nothing unusual. But I knew what was hidden beneath those boards. I knew how close the balance was between holding and teaching. The truck rolled forward. The midspan groaned softly, not a scream, just a whisper of disapproval. Karen shouted something, motioning for the driver to keep going. I could see her posture, hands on hips, authority dripping from every gesture. At the center of the bridge, the load shifted, the pins bending just enough to remind the laws of physics that they were in charge. The bridge dipped half an inch, maybe less, then straightened like it had just sighed. The driver hesitated. Karen shouted again, annoyed. The truck reversed slightly, then pressed forward. The boards creaked, flexed, then steadied. It made it across. I smiled faintly. Not yet, I murmured, but soon. That night Miguel called, test run. Successful, I said. Bridge spoke politely. He chuckled, next time maybe louder. Oh, next time's coming. 2 mornings later, the HOA scheduled a major concrete pour for the tennis courts. 3 trucks, Karen personally supervising. By 7 a.m. I was ready. Coffee, camera, patience. The creek glimmered like glass, pretending to be innocent. The first truck appeared over the hill, massive, loud, hungry. Behind it, another. Karen marched ahead of them, rolled up blueprints in one hand, megaphone in the other, like a general leading troops into battle. I hit record. The first truck reached the bridge and rolled on. The decking creaked, a deep wooden moan that sent birds scattering from the trees. The second followed close behind. The sound changed. It was no longer just creaking. It was conversation, wood arguing with steel, gravity calling in its debt. Then it happened. A clean metallic snap. One of the shear pins gave way. The bridge sagged, subtle but visible. The driver hit the brakes too late. The truck's front wheels dropped a few inches. The drum shifted its load, sending a surge of wet cement sloshing forward like a wave. For a split second, time froze. Then gravity spoke again, this time louder. The truck tilted forward. The drum hatch burst open, and a gray avalanche of cement poured out, cascading into the creek with a splash so loud it echoed off the trees. Karen screamed, not in pain, in disbelief, like someone who just watched their authority collapse in real time. I stood up, calm as a Sunday preacher, and started walking down the lane. By the time I reached the bridge, chaos had bloomed. The driver was out, yelling into his radio. Karen was shouting orders that no one listened to. A small crowd of neighbors had gathered, phones out, recording everything. Karen saw me coming. "You're done, Mike," she yelled. "You're going to jail for this." I stopped at the edge of the bridge, hands in my pockets. "Morning, Karen. You might want to read the sign next time." She pointed a trembling finger at the boards. "You sabotaged the bridge." "No," I said evenly. "You sabotaged common sense." Just then a police cruiser pulled up. One officer stepped out, young, calm, already tired of HOA nonsense. Karen rushed to him. "Officer, arrest him. He destroyed community property." The cop looked at me, then at the scene. A half-sunken cement truck, a cracked bridge deck, and a big, clear sign that said private bridge, 5-ton limit. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "this looks like private property to me. The restriction was posted. That truck clearly exceeded it." Karen's jaw dropped, "But it's a community route." He raised an eyebrow. "Do you have paperwork proving that?" Silence. I held up my phone, showing him the trail cam footage. "Everything's recorded, the weight, the signs, the crossings. You can see it for yourself." He watched for 10 seconds, then nodded. "Seems clear to me." Miguel, who'd shown up mid-chaos, leaned in close and whispered, "You planned this too well." "Just enough," I said. Karen tried to climb up the truck to grab her clipboard, slipped, and landed ankle-deep in gray sludge. The crowd tried not to laugh, tried but failed. The officer offered her a hand. She ignored it, pride weighing more than cement. By the time the tow crew arrived, the damage was done not to the bridge but to her authority. I stepped back, arms crossed, and watched them work. The bridge had carried the weight, sent the message, and held its ground. That night I sat on my porch again, bourbon in hand, watching the replay frame by frame. The sound of the pin snapping, the splash, the look on Karen's face. That was art. I saved the footage on 3 drives, one for me, one for Miguel, one for my lawyer. By sundown, I got my first email from Karen, of course. Subject line, "Formal complaint of reckless endangerment." I smiled, typed back 2 words, "Video attached." It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about record-keeping. Still, when I walked out to the bridge later that night, flashlight in hand, I couldn't help but feel something shift inside me. The air was cool, the wood damp under my boots. I looked down at the reflection in the water, a perfect mirror split by ripples. For years, that bridge had been my peace. Now it was my witness. And the next chapter of this little war. That was just beginning. By dawn, the whole neighborhood knew. You could feel it in the air, that buzz people get when gossip becomes currency. I woke up to the sound of what I thought were helicopters. Turned out they were drones, 2 of them hovering over my property, both with bright HOA stickers on their sides. One even had Karen's husband's name written on the controller. I stepped outside in my robe, coffee steaming in hand, and waved up at them. "Make sure you get my good side," I said. One of the drones dipped lower like it wanted to argue. A few minutes later, Miguel's old Ford rolled into the driveway, dust trailing behind it. He climbed out, grinning ear to ear. "Your bridge is trending," he said. I frowned. Trending. He held up his phone. Sure enough, someone had uploaded a 30-second clip of the whole incident. Title: HOA President Cement Truck Sinks on Homeowner's Bridge, Instant Karma. The view count was already past 50,000 and climbing. The thumbnail was perfect. Karen mid-scream, half-submerged, clipboard raised like a drowning flag. I took a slow sip of coffee. Well, I said, at least she finally built something viral. Miguel snorted. You better lawyer up. She's not going to take this lying down. He was right. By noon, 2 envelopes appeared in my mailbox, one from the HOA board accusing me of reckless endangerment, and another from Karen personally, a cease and desist letter written in Comic Sans. She'd CC'd the sheriff, the county inspector, and for some reason, the local garden club. I pinned it to my fridge with a magnet shaped like a trout. Nice try, I muttered. Around 2 that afternoon, Karen herself marched down the lane, flanked by 2 HOA security officers, both wearing fluorescent vests and holding clipboards. Behind them, a tow truck was still pulling the cement mixer from the creek, gray water dripping from its drum like gilt. You've destroyed community property, she barked. Community property? I said, tilting my head. Funny, I must have missed the part where the HOA paid to build it. This bridge services our development, she snapped. You've endangered our residents. I pointed to the sign bolted right beside her feet. Private bridge, 5-ton limit. Your trucks endangered themselves, I said. Karen jabbed a manicured finger toward me. You tampered with the structure. Miguel stepped up beside me. Lady, he said dryly, he's the one who built it. Karen ignored him. You'll pay for this. The board has voted unanimously to fine you $25,000 for property damage. I raised an eyebrow. Property damage to my own property. As president, she said, folding her arms, I can assess penalties for actions that harm community value. I smiled. Then maybe you should fine yourself for flooding the creek with cement. One of her security guys choked back a laugh, pretending to cough. Karen's face flushed crimson. We'll see you in court, Mr. Carter. Looking forward to it, I said. Bring a bridge expert, you'll need one. They turned and left, Karen's heels clicking like gunfire on gravel. Miguel chuckled. You poke the bear, she brings drones. You build a fence, she brings lawyers. Next step's probably tanks, I said. That evening, the video crossed 100,000 views. Comments poured in. Classic HOA power trip, gravity 1, bureaucracy 0, cement karma. Someone even remixed it with dramatic music and labeled it Karen versus physics, final round. I didn't post any of it, but I didn't stop it either. The world had already taken sides. By the next morning, the HOA Facebook page looked like a war zone. Karen posted grainy photos of my bridge and called it a dangerous, illegally modified structure. She wrote long paragraphs about reckless homeowners endangering the community. I commented under her post. Correction, structure held, truck collapsed, thanks for the free publicity. Within an hour, my comment had 500 likes and more laughing emojis than words. Later that day, the county inspector arrived, an older guy in tan uniform, clipboard thicker than a phone book. Got a complaint from the HOA, he said, walking carefully across the planks. Said you built this without a permit. I built it 15 years ago, I said, handing him the folder I'd kept ready. Here's the original approval from the county. He flipped through the papers, nodded and smiled. Looks solid to me. I could almost feel Karen watching from her window because 10 minutes later, she came storming down the hill, heels stabbing the dirt. What are you doing here? She demanded. Inspection, he said calmly. Everything checks out. That's impossible, she shouted. It collapsed. He gestured toward the bridge, which stood steady, only a single dented railing betraying the chaos. Looks pretty solid to me. Karen's mouth opened, then closed again. She turned, muttering something about bias and corruption, and stormed away. The inspector watched her go and smirked. She always like that? Only on weekdays, I said. He laughed. You're fine legally, Mr. Carter, But if she pushes harder, keep your records tight." "Oh," I said, "they're tighter than her tennis court budget." He laughed again, tipped his hat, and drove off. For a moment the world felt still again. The bridge creaked softly, the creek whispered like it used to. But peace never lasts long around people who need control. By evening, Karen's campaign had gone national. A local news station picked up the story, the video, the photos, the feud. The headline read, "Cement truck meets its match in HOA bridge dispute." They even sent a reporter to interview me. I wore my cleanest flannel and my most neutral smile. "Mr. Carter," she said on camera, "some say this was deliberate sabotage. What do you say to that?" I looked at the camera, steady. "Physics doesn't take sides," I said. "It just enforces the rules." That clip aired that night. Karen tried to spin it, claiming the footage was taken out of context. But it was too late. The internet had already crowned her, Cement Karen. Memes flooded social media. Her face on warning signs, bridge emojis under every comment. Someone even photoshopped her shouting under the caption, "Weight limit means you too." And just like that, the HOA's tight grip on the neighborhood began to slip. One board member, Thomas, a retired lawyer, stopped by quietly one morning. "Off the record," he said, "you're not the villain here, she's overstepped." "Off the record," I said, "I know." He gave me a faint smile. "You're not alone, half the neighborhood's tired of her nonsense. If she keeps this up, she'll destroy herself." As he drove away, gravel crunching under his tires, I realized something. The bridge hadn't just drawn a line in the creek. It had drawn one through the whole community, between those who respected boundaries and those who thought rules were only for other people. And I had no idea yet how far Karen was willing to go to erase that line. It started with a knock that didn't sound like a neighbor's, hard, deliberate, official. Scout barked once, then went silent, tail low. I opened the door to find a man in a dark suit standing beside a uniformed deputy. The man's smile was too polite to be honest. "Mr. Carter," he said, "you've been served." He handed me a thick envelope, heavy, expensive paper, the kind used when someone wants to feel powerful. The header read Homeowners Association versus Michael Carter. The list of accusations went on for pages: willful destruction of property, interference with community access, endangerment, slander. Karen had declared war in 12-point font. I set the papers on the table, poured myself a coffee, and read every word. Twice. There it was in black and white, her attempt to make me the villain in her crumbling empire. Miguel dropped by later, leaned over my shoulder, and whistled. "That's a lot of lawyer talk for 'I'm mad my truck fell in a creek.'" "She wants a spectacle," I said. "I'll give her the opposite." "What's that?" he asked. "Silence, documentation, patience." Over the next week, the neighborhood felt like a chessboard. Lines drawn, alliances whispered. Some neighbors stopped waving. Others started bringing pies just to show quiet support. Hannah left a note in my mailbox that said, "We're with you. She doesn't speak for us." I pinned it to my fridge right next to Karen's cease and desist letter. The HOA sent inspectors, then lawyers, then surveyors. They took photos, measurements, samples of the creek water, as if they could measure guilt in milliliters. Meanwhile, I stayed calm, fixed my fence, painted the porch, walked Scout every morning like nothing was wrong. The thing about bullies, they feed off reaction. When you give them none, they start starving. But silence has its own cost. One night around 10 p.m., I saw headlights through the trees. A car idled near the bridge for almost 10 minutes. When I stepped out onto the porch, the lights went off. The engine quieted. Then I heard it, the faint crunch of footsteps in gravel. "Karen," I said into the darkness. No answer, just the sound of retreating steps. I went back inside and checked the trail cam footage. Sure enough, a black sedan parked at the edge of the bridge. Karen's silhouette unmistakable, staring into the lens before turning away. She wanted me to know she'd been there. The next day, I printed the photo and slipped it into my legal folder. Proof doesn't get angry, it waits. When the court summons finally arrived, the date felt surreal: Tuesday, 10 a.m., County Courthouse. The HOA had filed a full civil complaint. Karen had even hired a PR firm, according to the gossip. She wanted headlines, vindication, and humiliation, mine preferably public. Miguel insisted on driving me that morning. "Just in case," he said. We walked into the courthouse, both wearing clean shirts and quiet confidence. Karen was already there, flanked by two lawyers in matching suits. She didn't look at me directly, which told me she'd already lost half the fight. The judge, a gray-haired woman with the calm eyes of someone who'd seen too many of these suburban wars, read through the filings. "Let's start simple," she said. "Ownership and liability." Karen's lawyer launched into a long monologue about community easements and shared infrastructure. He gestured dramatically, like the jury existed in his imagination. When he finished, my attorney, a calm, sharp man named Dwyer, stood up, handed the judge a single folder, and said, "Your Honor, Exhibit A through E are county documents confirming Mr. Carter's full ownership of the land, bridge, and creek access, including the original permit. Additionally, video evidence shows the HOA knowingly exceeded posted weight limits." He paused. "We also have photographic proof of vandalism to Mr. Carter's property, namely, the removal of warning signs and the cutting of his security chain." The judge flipped through the papers. The silence stretched. Karen shifted in her seat. Then the judge looked up. "Mrs. Lewis," she said, Karen's real last name, "did your association authorize vehicles over 5 tons to cross this bridge?" Karen hesitated. We determined that." "Did you authorize it?" She swallowed. "Yes." The judge nodded slowly. "And you were aware of the posted limit?" "Yes." The courtroom was quiet enough to hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. The judge leaned back, sighed, and said, "Then this is not a case of endangerment or interference. It's a case of ignoring a clearly posted restriction." Karen's lawyer started to protest, but she raised a hand. "Enough. I'm dismissing all charges against Mr. Carter. Furthermore, the HOA will cover all court costs and any structural repair fees." Karen froze. Her face went pale, then flushed. You could almost hear her ego shattering like glass. The gavel came down. Case dismissed. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited, small-town media sniffing for drama. Karen stormed past them, face hidden behind her folder. One reporter turned to me and asked, "Mr. Carter, what do you plan to do now that it's over?" I looked at the courthouse steps, the flag fluttering above, and said quietly, "I plan to go home." Miguel laughed as we walked to the truck. "That's it, no victory speech." I shrugged. The bridge speaks louder than I do. When we got back, the creek shimmered in the afternoon sun like nothing had happened. The bridge stood steady, scarred but standing. That evening, I got a message from Thomas, the retired lawyer on the board. "Board meeting tonight. Karen's position is on the line. You might want to watch." So I did, from my porch, bourbon in hand, tablet glowing in the dark. The HOA Zoom meeting was chaos. Half the members demanded Karen's resignation. Others called for a full audit of funds. The same people who'd cheered her on a month ago were now turning their backs, fast and loud. She tried to defend herself. It was about community safety. But nobody was listening. They'd seen the videos, the court ruling, the memes. Her voice cracked. Then she logged off. That was it. The empire collapsed not with a bang, but with a Wi-Fi disconnect. I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the quiet bridge glowing under moonlight. Scout lay by my feet, tail thumping softly. For the first time in months, I felt the kind of silence that doesn't ache, the kind that heals. But deep down, I knew Karen wasn't finished. People like her rarely walk away quietly. And sure enough, a week later, something new appeared in my mailbox. No stamp, no name, just a folded note on plain paper. All it said was, "Enjoy it while it lasts." For a few weeks, the neighborhood felt still, almost too still. No notices on my door, no trucks on my bridge, no HOA letters stuffed in the mailbox. Just the hum of crickets at night and the wind brushing through the pines. Scout would nap by the creek again, the way he used to, chasing reflections instead of tension. But even peace can make you uneasy when you've lived too long in conflict. You start waiting for the next sound, the creak of a gate, The engine that shouldn't be there, the whisper of someone testing your patience again. It came one night just after midnight, a low engine barely idling, then headlights off, then on again, cutting briefly through the fog that hovered over the bridge. I stepped quietly onto the porch, flashlight in hand, heart steady but alert. Scout growled, low and quiet. A figure moved near the bridge, faint against the mist. I called out, "Who's there?" No answer. Then the sound of a metal container dropping, a quick splash, and whoever it was ran. By the time I reached the edge of the bridge, I could still smell it, gasoline. For a moment I froze, letting my brain catch up with what my body already knew. Someone had tried to burn it. My bridge, my home's lifeline. I swept the flashlight across the planks, dark, wet, shimmering where the gas had spread. But it hadn't caught, maybe too damp, maybe fate was still patient with me. I grabbed the hose, rinsed the boards until they glistened clean. Then I checked the trail cam. The footage was grainy, but there she was, Karen, hood up, face half hidden but unmistakable. Miguel came over the next morning, jaw tight. "You call the sheriff." "Not yet," I said. "Let's see what she does next." He slammed his fist against the railing. "Mike, you're being too calm, she's lost it." I looked out at the creek. No, she's cornered, and cornered people make stupid choices. That's when you let them show who they really are. I printed the footage, backed up every file. Sent one copy to the sheriff's department with a quiet message. Attempted arson, suspect identified. They came by that afternoon, 2 deputies, polite but serious. They took statements, looked over the video, bagged a small red plastic fuel can we'd found near the far bank. "Any idea who might have done this?" one asked. I kept my voice even. "Just check who still has a garage full of cement dust." They smiled a little. They knew, everyone knew. That evening I sat by the creek long after dark. The bridge was clean again, washed and strong, but the air felt different, heavy, expectant. You can fix wood and nails, but not trust. The next morning, Karen's house was quiet, curtains drawn. No HOA patrols, no clipboards. I heard she'd been questioned by the sheriff and refused to comment. By noon, she was gone, moved out overnight, for sale sign in her yard by lunchtime. Most neighbors whispered she'd gone to stay with family. Others said she couldn't handle the humiliation. But I didn't care where she went. I only cared that she'd stopped crossing my bridge, literally and otherwise. A week later, the HOA held another emergency meeting. Thomas called me personally. "You should attend," he said. "This concerns you whether you like it or not." I joined via video, same as before. The board looked different now, tired, cautious, humbled. Thomas cleared his throat. "Effective immediately, Mrs. Lewis has been removed from the HOA and barred from any further leadership or financial decisions." A round of muted applause followed. I didn't clap, I just nodded. Then Thomas continued. "Also, given recent events, we're dissolving the HOA entirely. The majority of homeowners have voted to terminate it. No more dues, no more enforcement actions. We'll return all unspent funds to members." For the first time in months, I felt something deep in my chest unclench. No more notices, no more rules invented to justify control, no more clipboards in the night. It was over, or so I thought. That night I received one last envelope in my mailbox. No return address, no handwriting, just my name printed neatly across the front. Inside was a single photo, a picture of my bridge, taken from the far side of the creek. Under it, in small typewritten letters, it said, "Everything breaks eventually." The words sat heavy on my tongue when I read them aloud. Not a threat, not quite, but not peace either. I called Miguel, told him what I'd found. He came right over, flashlight in hand, scanning the woods around the property. Nothing, just the creek whispering under the boards, calm and cold as always. "You think it's her?" he asked. "I think it doesn't matter," I said quietly. "She's gone, but what she started will echo a while." He nodded, then smiled faintly. "Well, echo or not, she lost, and you've still got your bridge." "Yeah," I said, "I do." The next morning, I replaced the last damaged plank and sealed it with fresh oil. The wood drank it up like memory, dark, smooth, ready to heal. I hung a new sign at the entrance, just a plain wooden board with carved letters that read, "Respect boundaries." No threats, no warnings, just truth. Sometimes peace isn't quiet, it's earned. Weeks passed, the neighborhood slowly returned to life. Kids played again. The sound of laughter replaced the tension. The creek sparkled the way it used to. And every now and then, I'd hear that same old creek when I crossed the bridge, not from weakness, but from age. Like it was whispering, I remember. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Hannah stopped by with a pie again. "You look lighter," she said. "Bridge held," I replied simply. She smiled, "And you?" I took a breath, looked out over the water, still standing. She nodded, "Good, that's what matters." As she left, I watched her cross the bridge carefully, each step soft, respectful, the way it was meant to be crossed. When the sun disappeared behind the pines, I sat down by the creek, Scout's head resting on my boot. The night air smelled of pine and rain. Sometimes I still think about that last note, the one that said everything breaks eventually. Maybe it's true, maybe everything does. But some things, dignity, patience, quiet resolve, they don't break. They bend, they endure. And when they're tested hard enough, they hold. A month passed before I realized how quiet life had become. No trucks, no letters, no gossip echoing through the cul-de-sac. Just mornings that smelled like dew and wood smoke, evenings where the sky turned gold over the pines, and that same faithful creak underfoot when I crossed the bridge. It's strange, after all that chaos, the silence almost felt unnatural, like the house didn't know how to breathe without tension. Scout did, though. He'd nap on the porch, chase frogs near the bank, roll in the damp grass as if the world had finally gone back to what it should be. Sometimes I'd catch myself staring at the bridge for no reason at all. The way it arched slightly over the water, the way sunlight cut through the boards like veins of fire. It had scars now, faint cracks in the grain, a few new bolts from the repairs, but somehow those marks made it look more alive, like it had survived something with me. The neighbors had changed too. Without Karen's shadow looming over every mailbox, people started talking again, not about rules or paint colors, but about life. Kids played baseball in the street. Teenagers laughed without checking if they were violating noise ordinances. One afternoon, Thomas stopped by with a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. "She moved to Arizona," he said, settling into the porch chair beside me. "Karen." He nodded. "Her sister lives there, heard she's keeping a low profile." "Good," I said. "The desert could use more drama." He laughed, then fell quiet. We sat watching the creek twist under the bridge, the late light glinting like glass. After a while, he said, "You know, most people wouldn't have handled it like you did." "Most people shouldn't have to," I said. He nodded slowly. "The board learned something from this, about power, about how quickly it turns rotten when you stop questioning it." "Maybe we all did," I said, "even her." He raised his glass, to boundaries. I raised mine, and to holding. The whiskey burned, but in a good way. That night I walked the length of the bridge barefoot. The boards were cool under my feet, smooth where the rain had worn them, warm where the day's sun still lingered. I leaned against the rail and looked at my reflection in the water, older, calmer, a little tired, but not broken. I thought about all the noise, the shouting, the lawsuits, the humiliation, and how in the end none of it really mattered. The creek still flowed. The world still turned. It wasn't victory I felt, it was something else, something heavier, quieter. The next morning, a letter arrived from the county office. Not from the HOA, not from Karen, just the county. Inside was a simple note. "Mr. Carter, your property line has been verified and your right-of-way reaffirmed. Thank you for your cooperation." I smiled. 15 years of ownership, 1 year of chaos, and a single piece of paper finally said what I'd known all along, that sometimes the truth doesn't need defending. It just needs time to catch up. Later that week, I decided to repaint the railings. Miguel came by to help, bringing his usual thermos of black coffee and a radio that only played old country songs. We worked quietly, brushes sliding back and forth, the smell of oil and pine heavy in the air. "You ever think about selling?" he asked suddenly. I looked around the creek, the porch, the trees that had grown up like family. "Nah," I said. "You don't sell something that stood with you through a war." He smiled, fair enough. When we finished, we sat on the porch, arms streaked with paint, watching the new color dry in the late sun. Miguel's voice was soft when he said, "You know what's funny? All that noise, all that fighting, and in the end, your bridge didn't just hold. It changed people." I thought about that. He wasn't wrong. Even Hannah told me one evening while bringing fresh pie, that whole mess taught everyone something. Not about bridges, about people. About how far pride can go before it snaps. I thanked her but didn't say much, because deep down I knew she was right. Pride is like a load limit. Once you exceed it, something always gives. That night I walked out again, flashlight in hand. The water glowed under the moon like liquid silver. I ran my hand over the rail, feeling the faint ridges of the grain. This bridge had carried more than trucks and footsteps. It had carried truth, anger, patience, humiliation, resilience, and still held steady. Sometimes I wondered if that was what it meant to be human. To carry more than you should, to bend, to groan, to threaten to give way, and somehow still hold. A few days later, a stranger came by, a young man, maybe mid-20s, driving a county utility truck. He parked near the gate, got out, and walked toward me with a cautious smile. "Mr. Carter," he said, "I'm from the county infrastructure office. We saw your bridge in the news a while back. My dad's a civil engineer. He said it was built beautifully. Mind if I take a look?" I shrugged. "Go ahead. She's got more stories than bolts." He walked across slowly, studying every beam, every plank like it was a museum piece. When he came back, he said softly, "You built it right. Bridges like that last longer than people." "Maybe that's the point," I said. He smiled, nodded, and left. That night I sat by the creek again, Scout's head resting on my knee. Fireflies blinked along the bank, the air thick with summer. I thought about Karen, not with anger anymore, just curiosity. I wondered if she ever thought about this place, or if she'd convinced herself she'd been right all along. Maybe she did. Maybe that's how people like her survive, by never looking back long enough to see what they broke. But I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. I was thinking about balance, how the same gravity that brings things down also holds them steady. How the same bridge that once broke under weight now stood stronger for it. And how sometimes peace doesn't return in silence, it returns in understanding. It's funny how something as simple as a bridge can become a story, not just wood and bolts, but memory itself. I built it to cross a creek. Somewhere along the line, it became the place where I learned who people really are. Seasons turned after that storm of a year. The maples went red, the creek ran low, and winter crept down from the hills. The air grew sharp and clean. Scout would sit on the porch watching the fog roll in, tail thumping against the boards like a metronome. I'd sip my coffee, listen to the wind, and think about everything that had passed through here: trucks, threats, pride, karma. One morning I found something wedged between the rocks near the bank, a small silver bracelet, the kind Karen used to wear. It was old, bent, the clasp broken. I picked it up, turned it over in my palm. No note this time, no message, just silence. I thought about throwing it away. Instead, I laid it on the railing right above the creek. Let the rain decide what to do with it. That afternoon, Hannah stopped by again. She brought me coffee cake and that calm smile she always carried. "You've been quiet lately," she said. "Quiet's underrated," I replied. She looked toward the bridge. "They say the county might use your design for a new rural crossing program." I laughed softly. "Guess my bridge is going public after all." She smiled. "Seems right, it held." After she left, I sat there thinking about what she said. It held. Not just the bridge, me, the house, the peace I'd almost forgotten how to live in. That night rain came hard, sheets of it hammering the roof, thunder echoing off the valley. The creek swelled, roaring loud enough to drown out every thought. I grabbed a lantern and went outside. The wind bit at my coat, water rushing over my boots as I stepped onto the bridge. It moved beneath me, not breaking, not bending too far, just alive. I ran my hand along the rail, cold and slick. The same bridge that had once carried a 15-ton truck now carried a year's worth of memories, mistakes, and forgiveness. Lightning flashed, lighting the water like molten glass. In that split second, I thought of Karen again, not as an enemy, but as a lesson. About control, about pride, about what happens when we mistake power for purpose. I whispered into the storm, not sure who I was talking to, maybe her, maybe the creek itself. You could have just asked, I would have shared it. The rain answered in whispers. By morning, the storm had passed. The bridge stood firm, wet and shining, washed clean again. The bracelet was gone. I took that as the final sign. Whatever was left of that chapter had drifted downstream. The weeks rolled on, slower now. The world stopped watching. The videos faded from the internet, replaced by new scandals and louder stories. Life has a way of forgetting noise, but truth has roots. It stays. I started fixing up the rest of the property that spring. Repainted the porch. Repaired the old barn. Even planted a new tree by the water, a maple, like the ones that used to shade my childhood yard. Miguel came by less often, but every visit ended the same way: 2 chairs on the porch, 2 cups of coffee, silence stretching comfortably between us. One afternoon, he looked over the creek and said, "You ever think about what you'd have done if the bridge didn't hold?" I smiled, then I'd have built another one. He laughed, "You always make it sound so simple." "It is," I said. "You either break or you build." He nodded at that, took a sip of coffee and said, "Guess that's life, huh?" "Guess it is." After he left, I walked down to the bridge one last time before sunset. The air smelled of wet pine and sawdust, that same scent from the day I built it. I could almost see my younger self standing here, hammer in hand, skin covered in dust, a dog barking somewhere in the distance. Back then, I thought building something strong was about nails and boards. Now I knew better. Strength isn't what keeps things from breaking, it's what makes them worth fixing when they do. The creek whispered below, reflecting the sky in pieces. I leaned on the rail and closed my eyes for a long moment, listening. No trucks, no shouting, no false authority, just wind, water, and the faint sound of Scout padding across the porch behind me. For the first time in a long while, I felt it, that sound I used to call peace. And maybe that's what all of this had been about. Not the fight, not the court, not even the bridge. Just remembering what peace actually sounds like. The water carried the last leaves of winter downstream, glinting like tiny coins in the light. I thought about letting go, about how every fight, no matter how loud, eventually finds its quiet. Sometimes karma doesn't look like punishment, it looks like stillness. It looks like a bridge that shouldn't have survived, but did. I took one final step across, the wood creaking beneath me like an old friend stretching awake. When I reached the other side, I turned, looked back, and smiled. She was still standing. So was I. And maybe, just maybe, that's all the victory anyone really needs. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one. The truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.